This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 10th of June 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm 2M.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Yatani headache. In the Standard, MARAGA, we are on road to anarchy. And in the Star, MARAGA censures Kenyatta over veto on 6 judges.
Such negative headlines.
And do people know what anarchy actually is?
I don't think so.
It's a synonym for it is MARAGA.
2M, kick us off.
Anyway, I'm not exactly sure how David MARAGA became Chief Justice. I've never seen a specimen quite like him. But before I tell you, allow me to ask some questions. One, which Chief Justice in the world have you ever had going to vote in a presidential election? Which Chief Justice votes in a presidential election, knowing very well that he may have to adjudicate on the same election a couple of days later? Doesn't this amount to conflict of interest? 2, have you ever seen a Chief Justice anywhere in the world go on national television and demand for a Mercedes S500? David MARAGA is on record of demanding an S500 Mark from UHURU Kenyatta. Yes, the Chief Justice of a whole country went on live television and demanded for a Mark. In 2017, after annulling the 2017 election, MARAGA took a flight to Lithuania. What for? We don't know. But why fly to George Soros territory just after annulling an election? What was so urgent? How can a whole Chief Justice be globe-trotting when he's plunged the whole country into crisis? How did the judiciary allow itself to be diminished by such juvenile demands like an S500 car? How did the judiciary let itself be led by a simpleton? How did the JSC deviate from the esteem and eminence of Kitili Mwendwa, Abdul Majid Koka, Cecil Miller, Evans Gisheru, or even Bernard Chunga? People, we haven't noticed that we have let mediocrity fester in high office for too long. Our national mediocrity index is very high. We have elected fraudsters and jailbirds as governors. We've appointed village headmen as Chief Justice. We even have a sitting Supreme Court judge that has been charged with in court with criminal charges. It's no wonder Mount Kenya is singing Hasura Nation, a slogan for Wezi. Mediocre kabisa. Anyway, back to MARAGA. I am glad the man is retired. A more competent, a more tempered Martha Koome is a breath of fresh air. And I hope she drains the MARAGA swamp clean.
Ooh, tough words there.
So I guess I'll continue on that note of the MARAGA headlines. But today I actually want to speak about the word shall. Over the past couple of months, this word has come to mean quite a lot and quite a little in this country. The CJ shall advise the president to dissolve parliament, and the president shall dissolve parliament. The president shall appoint all judges in accordance with the recommendation of the JSC. Now, according to the recently unemployed David MARAGA, this means that the president has no leeway, that his hands are bound by the Constitution. So I wish to disagree with this and explain why. In major jurisdictions around the world that Kenya both respects and has been inspired by, the word shall has become a bit of a nuisance. It is actually one of the most heavily litigated words in the world. Why? Nearly every jurisdiction has held that this word shall is confusing because it can also mean may, will, or must. It can be binding, it can be a suggestion, or it can be an option. All in one. So consider this. What about laws that state no person shall ... If shall means that you have a duty to or that you are required to, we have a problem. Because now we're saying that no person has a duty to do XYZ, even though we're trying to tell them that you should not do it.
Precisely.
Now, this may be a semantic example, but it begins to show how the nature of this word is tricky. In fact, most countries have opted to remove shall in favor of the word must. So what is my point? This constitution is full of contradictions, and many of them boil down to word choice. But in my view, one of the crimes of this constitution was stripping the president of his executive functions and relegating him to a prefect who takes orders from others. The NIS told us that those 6 judges were not fit to hold office. Following that, the president had options. Must he appoint them? May he appoint them? Or will he appoint them? If he hasn't dissolved parliament yet, maybe those 6 judges could be appointed again in the next 13 months. Who knows? And just a random thought to end. Why was MARAGA even speaking to the press this week? I mean, the guy went home with 16 million shillings, a retirement package, 1 million shillings in a monthly pension, and 3 cars. He doesn't want you to know this, but this guy is living a good life.
Yes.
So why come out of retirement to muddy the waters?
Yeah.
Simple answer. Remember the MARAGA who stood at the steps of the Supreme Court and gave a press conference to tell the president off and request that S-500 2M told us about? That is the real David MARAGA. And his interview last night was that same person, clamoring for fame and glory and forgetting his role, that then and now should not be political.
I completely agree. This constitution is very playful, and that's why we call it Katiba Mbichi.
Yeah.
You know, and ensuring that the person who's as incompetent as that fellow we're talking about is taking care of it and trying to interpret it even makes it more dangerous.
Yeah.
So, like I said this week, I admire the Kenyan presidency both as a political and constitutional institution. But that there has not only been a preoccupation to keep the executive weak, there has been an encroachment on presidential authority by other branches of government. And this has substantially weakened the functioning of the executive branch. I am yet to see a decision that the president has made that has not been for the greater good of the country. When I see the former justices making certain statements, it is as if they are engaged in a war to cripple a duly elected government. If we can all agree that the president's role is not simply ceremonial, then the irony is that those who oppose this president constantly accuse his administration of shredding constitutional norms and waging a war on the rule of law. When such a dispute arises, I think there's one aspect of contemporary thought that tends to operate to the disadvantage of the executive.
Absolutely.
It is the idea that politics in a free republic is all about the legislative and judicial branches protecting liberty by imposing restrictions on the executive. The idea that the greatest danger of government becoming oppressive arises from the prospect of executive excess. So there's a knee-jerk tendency to see the legislative and judicial branches as the good guys protecting society from a would-be autocrat when it's not really the case.
Yes.
And this comes out of early English Whig view of politics and English constitutional experiences, where you started with a king who holds all the cards, he holds all the power, including legislative and judicial. Then with political evolution involved, there's a process by which the legislative power gradually over hundreds of years is reigned in the king and extracted and established and its powers, as well as those of the judiciary. Now we see in Kenya an executive branch that struggles to even exercise a bit of power. That's why the president from time to time must call into action prudential judgment. So recognizing that there are decisions that frequently have to be made promptly on incomplete and uncertain information, or information that can't really be shared with the public yet. The president can also make use of the precautionary principle, recognizing that he alone is accountable for discharging certain obligations, such as protecting the public safety. And so it is better when he has imperfect information to be wrong and safe than wrong and sorry.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So on that note, we had those 3 headlines. I suspect we're going to throw them all out.
Very far.
Don't ask.
I have a hunch.
Very far. We should
should
throw them very far.
There you have it.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Gluttony by Francine Prose.
Yes, and of course this week was inspired by the 7 deadly sins, and today, as the book title says, we're looking at gluttony. So it may be far less common today to think of gluttony as an actual crime against heaven, but it is still, as I said, among one of the 7 deadly sins. But as I read the book, I kept thinking about how we live in a world of 2 extremes. No sooner has modern civilization conquered the problem of food shortages, we are then told we have the opposite problem, an epidemic of obesity. But it also made me wonder, can Africans really relate to this certain problem? But this book is about gluttony. And Prose writes in her introduction, if we are what we eat, then how we feel about eating and eating too much reveals our deepest beliefs about who we are, what we will become, and about the connections and conflicts between the needs of the body and the hungers of the spirit. And the author says that unlike the other deadly sins, lust and gluttony are associated with behaviors required for the survival of the individual and of the species.
I love it.
If we were to stop eating, we would die.
Yes.
And if we were to stop mating, the species would die out.
Correct.
So how did religion work around these very inconvenient facts? So the traditional solution to the problems of gluttony and lust have been to suggest that the element of sin only enters when we allow ourselves to relax and enjoy the satisfying needs of the body.
Yes.
We are allowed to eat and to have sex as long as we don't like it. But the author makes a great point of asking, with this particular deadly sin, who exactly does it harm except the glutton himself? Who am I harming by eating too much? And so early theologians, she tells us, had two main reasons to consider gluttony more than just a personal weakness. First, worship of the senses in general and of the senses of taste in particular turns our attention away from holy things and becomes a substitute for the worship of God. And the second reason is what she calls the gateway sin argument. So gluttony, as the story goes, relaxes our moral guard and paves the way for other sins, just as people suggest that marijuana use is supposed to pave the way for use of other harder drugs. So as the author points out, the gateway sin argument actually made more sense during those centuries when the term gluttony actually signified not only excessive eating, but also overindulgence in drink. So if I go back to my first question, with the original term of what gluttony means, that overindulgence in drink, maybe Africans do actually understand. They can possibly relate.
Absolutely, I love it. Now, I love the chapter on the great moments of gluttony. The central thesis of this chapter is that in as much as gluttony is frowned upon, there's not a single human being who will not confess that they haven't on any occasion stuffed their bellies full. And she's right. I mean, you only need to watch 2J during lunch. Girl can eat.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway, Francine delves into a book written by M.K. Fisher called Gluttony. In that chapter, Fisher explores the joys of overeating and somewhat links this to our physiology, basically saying that our appetites are largely informed by how we are built. Fisher goes on to give an account of one of the great heroes of gluttony, Diamond Jim Brady, a railroad magnate of the Gilded Age, who so, or the story goes, would begin his meal by sitting 6 inches from the table and would quit only when his stomach rubbed uncomfortably against the edge.
Oh, wow.
To that effect, he might consume at a single dinner dozens of oysters, some crabs, turtle soup, 2 ducks, several lobsters, a steak, a rabbit, and just to keep healthy, various kinds of vegetables.
Sounds a lot like you too, huh?
Absolutely, no shame. For dessert, he might eat an array of pastries and an entire box of chocolates. Peke yake, modo mwe, I'm telling you. But what people did not know was that Brady's stomach was 6 times the normal size of a human stomach. Wow. He was not gluttonous, but rather monstrous. He was a member of a nearly extinct breed, big men, big eaters whose appetites mirrored their social economic ambitions. And he truly embraced his size. Oh. Lastly, I want to vouch for this deadly sin, and I couldn't put it better than Francine did. She says, however one praises or condemns this problematic and eternally seductive deadly sin, one thing seems clear. The broad, shiny face of the glutton has been and continues to be the mirror in which we see ourselves, our hopes and fears, our darkest dreams, and the deepest desires. Kuleni mushibe.
Interesting. Wow. I feel like this whole week, 2M has advocated for all of these 7 deadly sins.
So I came across a story in the book, and it is a medieval legend. And so according to it, the hermit John of Beverley was tested by God, who sent down an angel. And the angel asked him to choose among 3 sins: drunkenness, rape, or murder. Ooh. Sensibly, as anyone might, like 2M, the hermit chose drunkenness. Or not so sensibly, because as it would soon turn out, he, in his drunken stupor, he murdered and raped, or he raped and murdered his own sister.
Wow.
So I just to add on to what TJ was saying, the theory that gluttony makes us let down our guard is something that has continued over the ages, that it weakens our moral defenses. And she goes back to Thomas Aquinas?
Yes.
Aquinas, yeah.
Aquinas, who lists the 6 daughters of overeating, that what overeating does, which is excessive and unseemly joy, uncleanliness, talkativeness, and the dullness of mind. So basically, when you overdrink and overeat, you stop thinking rationally. However, she goes in the early chapters. She goes on to ask a question. When Jesus performed the miracle of the fish and the loaves, she says, "I doubt there were people in the crowd condemning it as gluttony.
Yeah.
In fact, if people helped themselves to more than one loaf and more than one fish, I doubt anyone said that they were being greedy." But what she goes on to say is that quite possibly this had political significance to serve as a way of separating between Christianity and Judaism. So Judaism, as we know, has quite elaborate dietary laws with things being kosher and whatnot. And so she says that this passage from the scripture became a touchstone for those who would argue that what and how much the good Christian put in his stomach mattered less than what he had in his soul and his heart. So early Christian theologians actually were quite tolerant of this overindulgence. And I think we still see it. Christmas Day, when people go for their lunches, I mean, it's these big feasts. It's a thing that brings people together.
Easter.
And so for once, and Easter, so once in a while you're allowed to sort of overindulge. Now, again, like you said, the fixation on the food, I think, is what causes the issue, or the emotions and the psychology behind why you eat. So in modern times, we're told, we have a preoccupation with sampling perhaps the trendiest dishes. So 2M now is into sushi all of a sudden. And so she finds it paradoxical that we have this obsessive horror with obesity, and we've become a culture of gluttons, she calls it. Yet early philosophers actually had very little interest in why people ate. They just assumed that you had the willpower. But now in modern times, which is why they say diets don't work, is because you're eating not because you're eating because of convenience. There's some psychological or emotional problem that you're dealing with. Some of them are you experience sexual abuse, physical abuse, unexpressed rage, grief. You're the object of discrimination, and so you use food as this coping mechanism. Now, what was interesting that I came about is this phenomenon called mukbang. So mukbang is a trend that dates back to 2009, started in South Korea. And basically, and you can Google this, and there'll be perhaps a short video showing you this, is people eating these copious amounts of food, big soup noodles, bowls of noodles, or big crabs, things that are just a lot. And you're just watching them eat. Now, what it helped South Koreans do, and other people apparently, is curb their cravings. So you're eating your salad, but you're watching this person eat really, delicious food. And apparently it helped curb their cravings and gave them some kind of comfort. Some people even feel full watching.
Maybe we should show Kenyans a video of people taking loans.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
So I'll end with this on a day where we didn't have winning headlines. George Bernard Shaw, in his book Man and Superman, said, and my sister's favorite quote, "There's no love sincerer than the love of food." Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Free to Air and Star.
I feel like we're learning nothing this week about sinning. Anyway.
God bless.